Përshëndetje të nderuar miq të Radio Televizionit 21, përsëri jemi bashkë në ÇELØSI. Këtë radhë pak më ndryshe. Nëse keni dëgjuar të flitet për Plug-in City, Arkigram, apo dhe për objektin shumë interesant në mes të Gracit, të Austrisë, Kunsthaus, atëherë sigurisht se ju vjen në mendje Sir Peter Cook, arkitekt eminent britanik, por edhe botëror, shkrimtar dhe njëkohësisht edhe profesor në shkollat më prestigjioze të arkitekturës në botë. Sir Peter Cook u nderua për shkak të lëvizjes Arkigram nga Instituti Mbretëror i Arkitektëve Britanikë me medaljen e artë mbretërore në vitin 2004. Për më shumë, kjo lëvizje promovonte lëvizjet e arkitekturës neofuturistike, e cila pretendonte të ishte sa më larg politikës. Për të ndëgjuar më shumë rrëfimin e Sir Peter Cook dhe projekteve të tij arkitektonike në përbot dhe konceptet mbi arkitekturën, pata kënaqësinë që ta takoj personalisht e ta intervistoj në javën e arkitekturës në Prishtinë. Do ta ndjekim rrëfimin dhe kthehemi bashkë në studio.
First of all, it was a period when there was a lot of building going on. It looked as if it was a good period. But I think the Archigram, the group of people that formed around Archigram, it's a very organically interesting group because the age difference was over 10 years between the oldest and the youngest. And all 6 people had studied in different architecture schools. They didn't come from the same school or from the same town. And I think our tastes were very different. Our tastes in music and girlfriends and art and many clothing were very different one from the other. But we had certain common interests, and in a sense, to use a colloquialism, we got off on each other. You know, that because one person had an aspect that you didn't have, it was fascinating and interesting. And we shared many enthusiasms. And we realized very rapidly that although there was a lot of building going on in the UK at that time, a lot of it was very boring and very solid and very pleased with itself. And we became interested in also, I think, parallel breakthroughs that we'd been happening in other fields. London was very active in terms of music and in art, and a lot of the things that were happening had originated in the art schools, not just the universities. And it just so happens that 3 of the 6 people in Archigram had started off in schools of architecture that were part of art schools. And this is very particular. And so we, you know, our friends were painters and graphic designers and people who made installations and funny things. And I think there's a strong element of that in the work of Archigram. There's also a subplot, which is that 2 of us came from the seaside, from seaside towns, and I will be explaining in my lecture tonight that that is also a contributory factor. Because the English are very funny. They seem to be very uptight. And I have discovered over many years that there are many similarities between the English and the Japanese. We have a very apparently tight thing, but we're very, very silly behind the scenes. We like silly things and jokes and drinks. And in the seaside, the English let their hair down. They become very different. And I think I was observing this consciously or subconsciously, and it certainly is a constituent element in the work that I've done. So there's that factor as well. There's a factor also that 3 of us were taught by very important people in the history of architecture. David Green had classes from Buckminster Fuller. I had classes from Peter Smithson, and Ron Heron had classes from a guy from Berlin, Julius Posner, who linked to, and one of my teachers was also linked to the Berlin groups and Mendelssohn and so on. So we had not, in a way, influences were not necessarily provincial. They were from some of the leading people who were avant-garde in generations before us. And so in a sense, and don't forget there were 6 of us with lots of different interests. Therefore, in a way, the physiognomy of the Archigram group was quite complex and quite influenced. The age difference was very useful. So 2 or 3 of the Archigram people had already done buildings, had already made fire stations and theatres before. And we, the 3 younger ones, in a way were the first generation that did not have to go into the army. That's also another factor. So we had freedom, we were young, we were able to be young. And you mix this all together, it's a very complex mix. It's like making a Christmas pudding, but it's dependent upon many different factors. And I think that gave Archigram its strength and its richness and its resilience. And often we would do projects, one or other would do projects. Sometimes 2 of us would do one project, 3 would do another project, 1 would do a project, another would do a project that latched onto the other project. And we would say, this has upset them. And we never said who the them were, but we knew that outside the door was a great Philistine world of people who didn't understand these things, and we maybe were a bit arrogant. But also there were a lot of architects who were quite happy to do boring stuff. So we were attacking them as well. That it's important for architecture to have certain abstract ideas. I think it's important for it to have certain mathematical pursuits or technological pursuits, I think it's important for it to be consciously dealing with culture, both high and low. But I also think that it can take any situation. I mean, I think that we now have the possibility that a programmed computer can more or less design a building, can even manufacture the parts. You almost need a robot could do a building, and it would work. But there is a sensibility, there is a sense of theatre. I think every architecture, even very plain architecture, has a sense of theatre. I we just walked outside for 10 minutes this morning in this sort of promenade, and you can see how there's a desperate wish to set an avenue, a promenade, that it should have a sense of theatre. At the moment, the buildings are not up to the ambition, but there is the stage ready for the theatre. But I think even if you go into a toilet, it should be more than just whether the flush works. It can either be agreeable or disagreeable. They can either put the toilet roll in the wrong place or the right place. But then, there's more to it. And I think that to pretend otherwise is almost a sort of ignorance. I mean, I would even be as arrogant as to say that if you pretend that architecture has no theatrical influence, has no influence upon your psychology, then you're just dead. You're blind. Sure, you go into a room, you go and visit somebody's house. You either feel, or you feel,
It affects you.
It affects you.
Lëvizja Arkigram si një vizion utopik I fund viteve 60 dhe fillim viteve 70 është një nga veprimet më revolucionare të bëra në historinë e arkitekturës. Sir Peter Cook, përveç se themeluesi I Arkigramit, ishte njëri ndër anëtarët më të rëndësishëm të këtij grupi dhe kësaj utopie, ideja së cilës para së gjithash ishte të parandalonte modernizmin nga steriliteti. Arkigrami për krah Cook përbëhej edhe nga arkitektë të tjerë të njohur si Warren Chalk, Dennis Crompton, David Greene, Ron Heron dhe Michael Webb. Përmes punës së tyre, këta arkitekt dhe fryma që përçonin shfaqte rebelizëm kundrejt rregullave të praktikës tradicionale në atë kohë, duke krijuar vizione që për kohën mund edhe të konsideroheshin si qesharake dhe për dikë ende janë të tilla. Ata përpiqeshin që duke kombinuar komercialen me teknologjinë digjitale të krijonin arkitekturën e tyre avantgardiste. Sipas Peter Cook, Arkigrami ishte me të vërtetë ide revolucionare e cila avokonte për një jetë më të mirë, jetë e cila jo domosdoshmërisht duhet të kushtozohet nga agjendat politike. Qëllimi I Arkigramit ishte që arkitektura të bënte më shumë në këtë drejtim. Disa nga projektet më të njohura të kësaj lëvizje janë Plug-in City, qyteti në idenë e një megastrukture, The Walking City apo qyteti që ecë, vizion për instalimin e ndërtesave inteligjente dhe robotëve gjigant e të tjera.
Well, I think it was to do with tectonics, but it was also to do with romance. This is something that we are, in our day job, we were actually working on system-built housing in the day job, and that was sort of in the night. I did the Archigram at that time. And I think it was also looking at the history of prefabrication, looking at the world of Buckminster Fuller, looking at what could be done in car production, looking at what could be done in means of production other than in the strictly architectural tradition, meaning looking at caravans, looking at tents, looking at temporary structures, favelas, blah, blah, blah. And then, on the one hand, rationalizing it, and on the other hand, in a sense, elevating it to another level of order, but with romantic variation. If you look at the drawings of Plug-in City, they are sort of hills and valleys and corners and funky pieces, because it was saying, look, system building doesn't have to be that boring. It doesn't have to be dogmatic. It doesn't have to be like in Eastern Europe, where it's just like that. And I think looking back on it so long afterwards, there are certain aspects of it which I think are still applicable. I don't think I want to make it look like that. Although, interestingly, in a quick drive into Kosovo last night and a quick 10-minute walk this morning, I think you do have particular issues here in terms of built structure and urban form. And in a funny way, I could imagine that if it were extremely well done, a certain amount of prefabricated building could be very useful and would enable you to have very efficient bathrooms and kitchens. And then maybe you can still develop local nuances around it. So I think now, if I were approaching the problem, if I was looking at Kosovo, for instance, I would say, yes, it would be extremely efficient and economically efficient and useful and save a lot of bother to have certain elements that could be prefabricated. In the same way that you import tin tomatoes, it's handy. We buy our shoes from somewhere, it comes. But then, just because we buy our shoes from the same shop doesn't mean the rest of what we wear is the same. And I think that you could apply that. I also think that there's something very intriguing here about your use of land, which I've only been here for less than a day, but there's something intriguing about what you do with interstitial space, with leftover space, because it seems here you just leave it, which means you don't really have an urbanism. You have a series of pieces of built structure sitting in a field. But then that's a long conversation. Yeah, and but I think then you see these two conversations coalesce, because if I'm talking about theatre on the one hand, I'm also talking about practicality on the other hand. If I'm talking about the basics of architecture on the one hand, I'm talking about the way in which particularity and nuance and even tradition, dare I say it, or things which that public will recognize come into being. Now, that doesn't mean that you necessarily design for the lowest common denominator, but at least you say, people like football. Okay, what do we do that enables them to enjoy football from their living room? Or, people like cats. I don't know, maybe they don't like cats, but you go to some particularities. But I'll come over this territory this evening quite a lot, I think.
Padyshim që vitet 60 ishin periudhë ndryshimeve radikale dhe avancimeve teknologjike. Yuri Gagarin u bën njeri i parë që shkeli hënën. Zbulimi i fotokopjuesit, laserit e hologramit si dhe pilulat kontraceptive ishin zbulime epokale të asaj kohe. Në procesin e rimëkëmbjes një dekadë pas luftës, arkitektura britanike ishte jashtëzakonisht e arrirë në përpjekjet e saj për t'u bashkuar këtyre ndryshimeve sociale. Pikërisht Arkigrami ishte grupi me të cilin krenohej Britania aso kohe. Plug-in City është një nga projektet e këtij grupi që më së shumti shfaq pikpamjet dhe preokupimet e arkitektëve të tij në vitet e hershme të karrierës së tyre. Plug-in City ishte kompozim një serie të tërë projektesh të vogla dhe ide që kishin marrë jetë mes viteve në 1962-64. Në botimet e atëhershme të pamfletave Arkigram, Peter Cook ishte shkruar: Ishte e pashpangshme që ne të mos hulumtonim atë që kishte ndodhur në mjedisin urban dhe të gjenim mënyra që ky mjedis të programohej dhe strukturohej ndryshe. Paraqitja e parë e projektit na vjen në vitin 1964 si një seri spekulative e propozimeve për qytete të kompjuterizuara dhe të kontrolluara, me elemente të cilat mund të vendoseshin dhe zhvendoseshin për brenda një megastrukture të tërë. Çështjet ekonomike, mjedisore dhe shoqërore si parime themelore të qëndrueshmërisë janë në fakt koncepti bazë dhe gjithë filozofia që fshihet pas Plug-in Cityt. Arkigrami bëri përpjekje për ta ndikuar të ardhmen me konceptet e saj futuristike, për të krijuar një dizajn krejtësisht të adaptueshëm në nevojat e njerëzve dhe në hap konstant me ndryshimet e teknologjisë që do t'i sjellin gjeneratat e ardhshme.
The first thing you must know is that Colin Fournier, who I designed it with, had for many years a girlfriend who came from Graz. So he knew Graz very well. I myself, who did not have a girlfriend from Graz, but nonetheless I had been there about 8 times with my own students from the Barnet, with people from the A, from doing a conference, doing lectures, doing exhibitions. So I'd been 8 times. And that site had, before we built on it, had a very dodgy bar that was open at 3 in the morning. And so I was familiar with going to that site because we would go to the bar because you could still get a drink in the middle of the night, which is, and because I'm a close friend of Colin, therefore I knew the site. I knew which was the noisy side of the site and the quiet side of the site and the funny old church at the back and the red light district there and the posh hotel. I mean, I know that site even before we touched it. The second thing is that I knew a lot of the buildings in Graz because one of the reasons I would take students there was because of the work of the Grazer Schule, which is a whole group of architects, more or less my generation, who were very active in the 70s, 80s, that sort of 90s, that period. And some of them were friends of ours, and Colin and I were very determined not to try and do a Grazer Schule building because this was done by our friends. But there were 1 or 2 very interesting buildings already there. There was Gunther Domenig's monastery, the cantina of the monastery, which is very interesting, sort of bubbly building. And there was later Volker Genke's Palm House, which is very special. In fact, I even used it on the cover of a book. And Graz is smaller, but I knew instinctively that site could absorb something quite special. And what have we done with the building? We have actually used it to talk about Graz, because you can, if you want to, program the illuminated facade with material coming that senses the city, rather like Toyota's Tower of the Winds in Yokohama. But also, the best part of the building is when you emerge at the top. You see, the notion of the building is again that it's theatre, that you put the exhibition place in a secret bubble, as it were, and the street goes on underneath it, the cafe, and it's just, and somewhere up there's a secret thing, and then you go up the travelator, which also I like because it's a very populist thing. I actually went up the travelator with the president of Austria. We had white wine in our hands, and it amused me. And we were talking about something, I can't remember what, we were chatting, and we were drinking white wine like you do in a vernissage, but it was going up a travelator, which is like you get in an airport or a railway station. Anyway, so then you go into this mysterious place, and then the theatre is made by whoever is making the exhibition. Then when you've done that, and you've closed off the world, there's one of the nozzles which you go to, and in fact looks at the castle. So in a way you celebrate we call it the naughty nozzle, that celebrates the castle. And then finally you go up at the very top, and the needle has the best view of town, and it pulls in the structure of the town of the River Mur and the castle and the whole, and actually celebrate the town. So in a way, the building is very much celebrating Graz as we find it. Now, I'm giving you this rather long answer because it wasn't, oh, what the fuck should we do? Okay, let's do a wobbly. It was very much looking at the site and seeing that the shape of the site left a condition which all you do is sort of splurge, like splurging tomato ketchup into a plate. The building form occupies that piece of site. And then you take the travelator up from the corner, which, knowing the site, one knew there was only one place you could enter. Didn't have to argue it. Didn't take long. You say, that's where you come in, blah. The other funny thing is then once we'd won the competition, had to organize it, and always, of course, costs have to be. It was actually quite a cheap build. It was what I call crap tech. It's not high tech because we didn't have the money for high tech. But what was interesting, we had to keep this building in the front called the Eisener's House, the Iron House. And then we discovered this was a piece of Austrian heritage, right, from the 19th century. But the pieces had come from Sheffield in England. They'd been shipped in. In other words, this piece of so-called Austrian heritage was actually some pieces of English industrialization. And I said, wow, that's marvelous. There are these loonies in the 19th century selling the Austrians some metal. Here's some more loonies at the end of the 20th century selling the Austrians some plastic. I mean, I exaggerate, I simplify, but the point I'm making here is that the vernacular is only a passing concept. You know, probably nothing in this room really originated in Kosovo. Nothing in this room really originated in Kosovo. I mean, maybe but the techniques. And gradually it gets absorbed into the vernacular. You know, I think that the mobile phone is now part of the vernacular. You see? I think we only say, oh, that's old, therefore it must be special. But things get absorbed into the vernacular. So I have a very kind of cynical view of history, if you like. History developed, or of the vernacular, or of what is considered to be local, or I think it has to be seen in a much more complex cultural context. And then you still take decisions, sure.
Habi, entuziazm, kontrast. Arkitektura spektakolare galerisë o arteve në Graz i lë të gjithë pa fjalë. Përderisa nuk është arkitekturë e zakonshme për një qytet si Grazi i njohur për kulmet e tij, megjithatë, galeria rënditet për mrekulli për krah objekteve tradicionale ekzistuese si një kontrapunkt i fuqishëm për t'i dhënë frymë bashkëkohore zonës historike të qytetit. Është pra fjala për Kunsthaus, objektin alien që e theksoi prezencën e Sir Peter Cook sërish, madje shumë fuqishëm në diskursin botëror të arkitekturës. Ai së bashku me arkitektin tjetër britanik Colin Foriner e fituan konkursin evropian për ta revitalizuar Eisernes House, objekt të rëndësishëm në Graz, dhe për ta zgjeruar atë në një shtëpi arti, e që në këtë rast ishte Kunsthaus. 1066 xhamat nga akriliku e mbështjellin objektin alien. Gjatë natës, Kunsthaus përcjell sinjale të cilat e bëjnë të vinë në shprehje dhe të perceptohet edhe në anën tjetër të lumit mur përmes fasadës së tij të tipit Bix. Drita natyrale në anën veriore të objektit depërton përmes të ashtëquajturave nozzles apo qafat e zgjatura të cilat vërehen të dalura edhe nga vështrimi i jashtëm i objektit. Jo të gjitha janë të kthyer në drejtim të veriut. Një prej tyre orientohet në lindje. Ajo sjell në pahkullën e orës, shënjuesin tradicional të Grazit nga brendësia e objektit. The Needle, që në shqip i bie gjilpëra, është një platformë xhami nga e cila shikohet jashtë qyteti. Vizitorët transportohen në katet lart përmes shkallëve lëvizëse. Kunsthaus në përdhesën e tij transparente posedon restoranin dhe sallën për medje, kurse në 2 katet lart ofron kushte të favorshme për ekspozita të ndryshme në të. Objekti funksionon si galeri publike e ekspozitave të shumta të artit dhe si seli organizatës së njohur austriake Kamera Austria.
Right, I have a very simple message. I have at the moment, I think I hold 3 or 4 professorships of one kind or another. Therefore, I feel I am a specialist in this field. I am a professor. So I can say, number 1, don't listen to your professors. Don't listen when they tell you what you should not read, what you should not look at, who you should not listen to. Because in so many architecture schools, including some rather good ones, the people who teach there actually obstruct. They like, you know, I know you're a teacher, but I have to say this because I believe, they're like a scoutmaster. They have a sort of power over a group of people, and they only really want their students to read what they think is relevant, look at the buildings they think are relevant, listen to the architects they think are relevant, and go and work for nice, safe offices that won't do anything too naughty. I'm not saying everybody wants naughtiness. In fact, I know a lot of students who actually want a quiet life. And I think they should go to quiet architecture schools and go into a quiet place and lead a quiet life. They don't need to be in Tokyo, London, New York, or Los Angeles. But, there are as many, almost, people who have never been permitted by their professors to look outside the box, as we say. Now, as a little bit comes now opening up because of things like the exchanges, you know. But the only thing, there's a very funny thing here, which is that very often the students who go on the exchange really treat it as a holiday. They're what we call tourist students. And the other problem is that, of course, in the rather good places where the students want to go to, why should the students from those places go to some rather dumb place? You know, I know this when I took over the Bartlett many years ago, and they had lots of Erasmus deals with here and there and there and there. And then we built the school up to be a very hot place, and people would come from, you know, Japan or from the Midwest or from north of England or somewhere, Belgium, wherever it might be. And then you say, well, we've got this exchange. They say, I've only just got here. I want to be here because it's what it's doing. I don't want to go to some bloody minor place up in the north of Sweden, you know, just because it's there. So that is a bit of a problem. And I'm being real, I mean, I'm an insider on this game. I know lots and lots of the layers. At the moment, the very interesting phenomenon is that we have a lot of Asian students in the American and British and Australian schools. And some of them are very smart. And Ilya and I were just talking about this whole phenomenon at breakfast because we tend to hang out in the same places. And they are beginning to be very smart. And I think there will be a moment in about 10 or 15 years when the Asian students are actually much better educated than the European students and smarter and more traveled. And then the minor European schools who will have not made much contact with them will have problems because actually they'll be left out of the loop, you know. And so I think I think personally that every architecture student should be forced to go to more than one architecture school in more than one country. If I was sort of had the power, I would say, you will not get your qualification unless you have studied at least maybe 2 years in another country. And I think there's another whole thing, which is I think there are some very interesting offices around the world, maybe concentrated in certain cities, which almost give us interesting, if not more interesting, more relevant education than a lot of crappy schools. And I think there's another thing, if I can get it off my chest, which is that in recent years, the schools have become dominated by what I call academic architects, people who are more interested in academe and some of them don't even have very much interest in buildings, which is tragic, you know. So I think there are a lot of issues, but I would say to most students, by definition, get the hell out. Even if you're somewhere quite good and you're getting on quite well, get the hell out. Go somewhere. I mean, the great thing is about architecture is that there's so many girls in architecture now. Certainly to the advantage of the guys, that people fall in love with each other, usually with somebody from another country, as I did. And that is very useful, because it, for the wrong or right reason, gets you out of your pocket. But you see, in my mind, all these things are related. And on the other hand, I'm a sort of elitist. I'm conscious of elitism and the usefulness of elitism, but I believe in a kind of open-ended elitism. I have a bit of the old Stakhanovite psychology in me somewhere, which is that if you're bright, you should be able to go as far as you can go, irrespective of whether your family has money or anything the hell. You should be able to go as far. I was educated entirely on state money, apart from early bits of school here and there, but nearly the whole time, and including going to the AA, which now is a very expensive school. I didn't sort of think about it. You know, that was just one, if one was smart enough, you got there. You went from provincial school to a famous hothouse school, and then you know. And I think that that's an issue, because I think a lot of schools decide to be local and feed the local offices, and that is the edge of their horizon. And some poor characters trapped into that because maybe they don't have the money to, or nobody's suggested that they might go elsewhere. I was very lucky at school because there was a teacher, an art teacher, the art master, who knew a lot about architecture, said there have been people at this school who've gone on to be interesting architects, gave us books about it, and 4 of us from one year immediately went to do architecture, 3 of whom ended up at the AA. And I think that's, you know, it's information too. But I could bang on about this for, it's all going to end up in cutting, it used to be on the cutting floor, but it's going to end up blanked out of the thing. But I have very strong views about this, as you might realize. And I've run 2 schools. And I'm still teaching. You know, I have an office, but I'm about to teach at Harvard in a month's time, which will be very interesting because I lectured there, but it's also a very particular place, a particular ethos, which I might find challenging to me. I will not find it boring myself. That's useful. We have just built an architecture school in Australia. So that's a very weird one, because you become, like we say in England, the poacher turned gamekeeper, you know. You actually build something about which you know as somebody who worked the process. And I had also actually, I had run an art institution. I ran the ICA. So that when I did Graz, I knew what it was, I knew what it was like to be the guy on the other side of the desk.
Yes.
With the architecture school even more, for longer. And that's quite weird, because, you know, you look at what they tell you you're supposed to put there, and you say, don't need that, but you do need a big room at the back where people can do this, or you need another toilet, or you need another truck entry, or funny things that are to do with how the place are. You need somewhere for the trapped faculty member to escape from the boring student. You need another bridge in the corner where they can get the hell out. Things like that. Anyhow, I could talk all morning, obviously.
Sir Peter Cook aktualisht angazhohet në studion CREB, të themeluar nga vetë ai dhe arkitekti Robertham në vitin 2006. CREB tashmë ka portfolio të suksesshme pasi ka fituar konkurse të ndryshme për teatro, galeri dhe objekte universitare. Objekti i tyre realizuar në kampusin e ri universitar të Vjenës, pra Fakulteti i Ekonomisë dhe Biznesit, është përblyer me titullin RIBA European Building për vitin 2014. Kampusi përfshin objekte tjera universitare të dizajnuara nga Zaha Hadid, Studio of Hitoshi Abe, e Studio Carne Pinos e të tjerë. Në mesin e këtyre objekteve të shumta që mbajnë emra të arkitektëve eminent, ajo që vjen në pah tek objekti Studio Scrap Janë ngjyrat, forma, koncepte dhe dinamika që krijon si tërësi kompozicionale. Peter Cook e konsideron Vjenën si një qytet të zymt, me ngjyra gri gjithandej nëpër pallatet e saj, prandaj objekti i tij përpiqet të thyejë këtë gjendje dhe të freskojë të gjallëroj, duke sjellë hareje disponim përmes lojës së ngjyrave në një zonë e cila u takon studentëve, atyre që vlojnë nga energjia dhe etja për të zhvilluar. Objekti shfaq konceptet e Cook dhe Robatham me idenë e tyre që një objekt universitar për të qenë hapësirë që jeton, frymon dhe ka sukses, duhet të ofrojë hapësira të brendshme bujare dhe këndshme, ftuese e jo vetëm klasa të rëndomta mësimi apo zyre. Përgjithsisht, objekti gjen frymëzim në vetë peizazhin natyror, e që me kalimin e kohës vetë objekti do të inkorporohet edhe vegetacioni.
Ja edhe këshilla e radhës për këtë javë, të nderuar miq.
Këndët apo mund të shikohet edhe me këndën mbi 37.
Këtu kemi përfunduar bashkë, të nderuar miq, ndërsa ju që nuk na keni ndjekur keni mundësi të na shihni në faqen tonë në Facebook, Celësi TV Show, si dhe në kanalin zyrtar Radio Televizioni 21 në YouTube. Mirëmbëjtje.